I think after 6 years of doing this channel, I've really worked on coping skills for my ADHD, and I've really gotten it under control. It has recently been brought to my attention that I am still incredibly impulsive. And I realized I didn't actually maybe work on that quite as much as I did the other things.
This episode is sponsored by Sunsama. Stick around till the end of the video to learn more about it.
So I'm impulsive, and I knew this about myself. I come up with ideas and I launch right into them. I take on new projects all of the time. It made me great at starting new projects and new ideas and starting a company. I started this YouTube channel because of an impulsive idea. Looking back at some of the things that have really gotten in my way in my life, they've not as much been about the inattention and the difficulties with productivity as they have been about my impulsivity. And it's something I've been reflecting on a lot lately and really coming to terms with, that a lot of the times it was impulsively getting into a relationship that turned out to not be good for me, or impulsively making a purchase that I couldn't really afford. Those are the things that really were getting in my way. It can be a hard thing to realize that something that I really like about myself is also something that is getting in my way, and not just hurting me. If I don't get my work done, that hurts me, but hurts other people. If I make an impulsive decision that affects somebody else, or I say something impulsively to somebody else, that doesn't just affect me, that can affect the other person too. I think when I get distracted, I have time to think about it. Oh, okay, I got distracted. What can I do to help me focus? Or when I'm not feeling motivated, cool, what strategies can I put in place to help with my motivation? With impulsivity, it gets trickier because it almost, to think about what you're going to say before you say it requires that we have a pause to begin with, that we have enough time to think about what we're going to say. And with impulsivity, you almost don't. There's very little, if any, pause at all between when I think a thought and when it's coming out of my mouth. And I talked to Caroline McGuire, the author of Why Will No One Play With Me, about this. And she said that's true for ADHDers. She's so tired of hearing people talk about oh, well, just pause and think about what you're going to say, because for ADHDers, there is no pause. We don't get that pause. And so that doesn't mean that we can just use that as an excuse and go around saying whatever we want and doing whatever we want and being oh, I have ADHD, I'm impulsive, sorry, or deal with it. But it does mean we have to get a little more creative about solutions and not expect ourselves to do something that is not within our ability. If we have really terrible breaks, we can't count on those breaks. And so we have to figure out other ways to slow ourselves down. And that's what I'm learning. There's a lot of advice that might make sense for somebody who doesn't have ADHD, who isn't impulsive, that doesn't make sense for us. One of those is never text during an argument, because then there's more chances for miscommunication and stuff like that. I am personally less worried about miscommunication at this point than I am about putting my foot in my mouth and saying something that I don't mean. Using text for me can be really helpful, because usually the person that I'm having an argument with, I understand them really well. I generally know where they're coming from. And so the best thing I can do for myself is to slow myself down by texting and giving myself a chance to read what I'm writing before I send it, so that I have that pause, so that I have that choice. Because a lot of the time it doesn't feel like I have a choice. It feels like that choice is taken away. And I've leaned into it. I've embraced it as a big part of me. But the truth is, there are times when I do want a choice. I want to be able to decide how I want to respond to somebody. I want to feel good about how I handled a confrontation or a difficult situation. I want to feel good about the decisions that I make. And if I don't have that pause and I don't have that choice, it's really hard to do that. And so I'm working on building in ways to slow myself down a little bit, so that I give myself back that choice. And then I'm not just at the mercy of whatever my brain impulsively decides to do. It is not an easy thing to do. And it doesn't always work. I might still text something that I probably shouldn't have texted if I'm really emotional. I might still make a decision to change things without really thinking them through. But it at least gives me a little bit of that, I guess, control back over my own brain and my own instincts, to be able to slow myself down and to put in guardrails. Because there are some times where maybe I do make a decision in a situation, but then maybe before I act on it, I can go talk to somebody else. Maybe I'm convinced this is what's great and we're going to go do it. But I just run it by somebody, because I know that I'm impulsive. I know that I'm not going to necessarily take the time to think everything through, and maybe they can help. and be like, okay, cool. Like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And like, maybe sometimes yes, because I can go really quickly, but sometimes maybe there is something that I missed and they can help me identify that. If impulsivity is like this double-edged coin, right? Where like sometimes it lands in the positive and like, oh man, like it's really great that I took that risk and I did that chance. And then like on the negative, it's like, yeah, I got into a car accident because that was a real bad idea to, you know, to go for a midnight drive. I want it to land on the positive a little bit more than it lands on the negative. And I want to have that choice. I want to slow myself down enough that I have a choice. And then in the areas where my impulsivity is great and helpful and fun, like, cool, nothing needed to touch there. Or maybe I even encourage it, right? If I know that I respond really strongly to visual cues and I impulsively do whatever the visual cue says to do, maybe I make sure that I put visual cues of like healthy stuff in my line of sight. Like I put a bowl of apples on the table or put my water bottle where I'm going to see it first thing in the morning. And like I take advantage of that. I don't know if I'll ever be able to give myself that pause, but at least set myself up for success. And maybe if I can't slow myself down in a situation, maybe it's like figuring out ahead of time, like if this happens, what am I going to do? If I'm going into a situation where I know that like somebody annoys me because they always talk about this one thing, like maybe decide ahead of time, if they talk about this thing, like what am I going to do? Am I going to go take a walk? Am I going to change the conversation? Like kind of cue that up in advance so that when I do impulsively do something, I have made a choice. Because if I can't make the choice in the moment, I can make it for myself ahead of time. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's what it's about. Like, it's about finding ways to set ourselves up for success so that we're making a choice ahead of time or slowing ourselves down enough in the moment that we can make a decision that we feel good about and we can respond in a way that is up to us and not our impulsivity. When I think about it, the times that I lost my job, those were me being impulsive. It was something that I said or did impulsively that I shouldn't have said or done. And I wanted those jobs. It's okay now that I don't have them anymore, but like in those situations, my impulsivity took away my choice. It wasn't up to me whether or not to keep that job because like I didn't even make the decision to say the thing that I said. It just came out of my mouth. And I want choice. Choice is a good thing. For me, one of the big things that I'm trying to do is recognize the times where my impulsivity is likely to be the most extreme and I'm likely to make decisions that I don't really feel good about. And that tends to be when I have really big emotions, whether I'm really scared or I'm really angry or I'm really happy and excited, enthusiastic. Like those tend to be the times where I will impulsively do or say something that I might regret later. And so that to me is now a cue. If I'm having big emotions, slow down. It does not always work, but it definitely works better than the pause. Like I might not be able to stop doing the thing or like pause before I do the thing, but like if I do it slower, that can often help a lot. But if I feel it in my body that I'm having big emotions, that is often a cue to me to slow down. Again, does not always work. Sometimes I need the guardrails. Sometimes I need the external supports, but I'm slowly figuring it out.
Speaking of impulsivity and choice, Sunsama is one of the main things that helps me with that. If you haven't heard of Sunsama, it's a system designed to help people mindfully plan their workday and work weeks so they can get their stuff done without burning out. I very often take on too much or try to overplan my day. Sunsama lets me know when I've got an unpredictable or unrealistic workload and encourages me to bump back tasks to the next day. And when I inevitably don't get everything I planned done anyway, because life and distractions happen, the task automatically rolls over to the next day. But won't they just pile up until we end up avoiding the app entirely because we're super overwhelmed? Not necessarily. Sunsama also has a feature called Auto Archive. If you turn it on, it automatically archives tasks that have rolled over for more than a few days, so they don't just keep piling up and getting us overwhelmed. Occasionally, I remember to dip into the archive and scroll through all the tasks I didn't get to, and I realized most of the tasks weren't actually all that important, or at least not as high a priority as the other stuff on my plate. Sometimes though, they actually were very important and just not as urgent. I absolutely don't want to forget about those, so I almost turned Auto Archive off. But Sunsama has this other cool feature where I can have a recurring task, in this case, review the archive, so I can rescue any critical tasks. The more I use Sunsama, the more I realize how thoughtfully it was designed and the better I get at planning my weeks. I don't think I've ever used it perfectly, and honestly, I don't have to for it to help, which is pretty cool. Also, Sunsama is so ADHD friendly, they have a trial period that doesn't require a credit card up front, so you can decide whether or not you want to be charged for it after you've tried it out. If you'd like to give it a try, I highly recommend it. Go to sunsama.com/a/howtoadhd. I hope you love it as much as I do.
Let me know what strategies you use with your impulsivity and what works for you. Thank you to my brain advocates and all my Patreon brains for being with me on this journey. I would not have been able to learn all of the stuff that I get to learn and share it with the world if it weren't for your support. So thank you so much. Like, subscribe, click all the things. That's another place where you can use your impulsivity. I'll see you next video. Bye, brains.